All right, the hard truths about self-employment. This is a video for anyone who is currently self-employed or anyone who one day wants to be self-employed, because I feel like these are things that I never really thought of before, but am now thinking of and experiencing as someone who is self-employed. I will also preface and say that this is less of a how to do things and an advice video and more of a here are the actual challenges and the problems that you might face based off of my experiences. And yeah, I just wanted to be very transparent about them and share them here. I guess the underlying message here is if you think that being self-employed will solve all of your problems, be ready for new problems and new challenges. In an attempt to be a little bit more organized with these videos, I have my phone here with a list of different things that I wanted to cover. So managing your time, balancing external perception and family guilt, productivity, financial inconsistency, and then yes, there is a little bit of advice or things that I'm doing in my journey now. So with that, I guess let's dive right in. So for starters, some background context. I am currently a full-time content creator. I previously worked in tech and I quit my job in July of 2024. Sorry, thinking about the years because time has been moving so fast. This isn't the first time necessarily that I've experienced being self-employed. Technically, there was a point in time where I was working on my own startup back while I was in school, but again, a little bit different context because I was still in school and I basically took a term or two off to work on that versus this is now full-time, full-time. I am doing content creation and running my own business every day. I will say though, I think that what I cover in this video applies to not just people who are full-time content creators, anyone who's self-employed, whether it's running your own startup, being a freelancer, or whatever it may be. Basically, just anyone who decides to take their own path and do that full-time. So I think the number one biggest shift or biggest challenge that I've seen so far in my journey of being self-employed, and I've also talked to a bunch of different friends who are also self-employed about, is managing your time. This is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people look to be self-employed because they want to have more control over their time, but it is also one of the biggest challenges and biggest adjustments that you have to face. The biggest difficulty here comes from trying to rewire your brain to not feel like it needs to follow the typical 9 to 5 schedule. I mean, that's the beauty of working for yourself. You can, in theory, set your own hours. Oftentimes you are working more hours than what you might put in a 40-hour work week, but that's part of the trade-off. When you realize that you have the freedom and flexibility to work in any hours, you start to feel a lot of friction in the beginning when you are working outside of those hours. So let's say, you did errands during the day or you just did other things during the day and then you decide to do your work at night or on the weekends. There's this weird feeling of guilt or something being off because you're just not used to operating on this schedule, and perhaps everyone around you or a lot of people around you are operating on those schedules. So it feels kind of weird to adjust to. I remember when I first quit my job, as much as I tried to do work during the day, I found that a lot of my creative work ended up happening at night because I was still trying to unlearn the habits that I had at work, where I spent that time working for another company and then only in the evenings was I doing my creative work, my content creation. So it took me a while to kind of realize that, oh, you know what, maybe I don't have to force myself into the regular 9 to 5 hours. Maybe it is okay to keep doing the creative stuff in the evenings since that's working for me right now. So figuring out what works for you very much so comes down to experimentation. When I was thinking about how I wanted to structure my routine this year, I did find myself naturally trying to fit into the 9 to 5 hours, but I guess with a more loose framework in a sense that if I start my morning at 11 a.m. or if I start at a different time, it's totally fine. And similarly, if I end at like 7 p.m. or I end later, it's also fine. I would say rather than time management, the thing that becomes really important is prioritization. Figuring out what tasks you want to prioritize, because very easily do the tasks just add up and it feels like you have everything going on at once. I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced at the start of this year was having this ongoing sense of urgency. Like I felt like I couldn't relax because it felt like there were so many tasks that I still needed to get done. And it's really interesting to think about this because as someone who is her own boss, technically I'm the one setting the deadlines. There are no real set deadlines for the most part. And so I spent a lot of time questioning, why do I have this fabricated sense of urgency? Why do I feel like I need to get everything done? And it's because I didn't really have a good system for prioritization. It was kind of just like, okay, this is on the list. I need to try to get all of it done. And it left me feeling very tired and lethargic instead of feeling very motivated and inspired. Something that I've been trying out recently in terms of how I plan my day is scheduling around things that fulfill me, scheduling my time around things that take care of me first. Because again, if I'm running this business, then no one's going to take care of myself other than me. So why would I not prioritize that? So what I mean by this is when I look at my calendar for the week, I will actually start to schedule in blocks of time for the gym, for social activities, for errands. I'll put in those items in my calendar first, and then from there, fill in the rest of the gaps with any specific tasks or the most important things that I need to do that day. So it may seem a little bit backwards, but honestly, this is one of the flexibilities and one of the perks of being self-employed is being able to shape your schedule around the things that you actually care about. So again, instead of prioritizing the typical 9 to 5 hours of when you would typically do work, instead you're shaping it around things that you need to get done or that will make you feel good, like working out, seeing your friends, whatever it may be, and then filling up the gaps later. I think that's kind of been one of the ways also that I've been able to start to let go of some of the guilt associated with having this like super long task list that never feels like it's going away. I also think that this mindset shift helps a lot because what I view as a successful week now isn't necessarily measured by my productivity, but instead it's based on the things that I did that week that made me feel good. Did I actually take care of myself? Did I actually take the time to cook and clean and do the things to make me feel like I'm a self-sustaining human? It's these little things that I think add up in our lifestyles, and they can creep up really quickly if we neglect them. Now, another challenge that I remember facing and still do at times with regards to managing your time is knowing how to turn off work. So the thing about self-employment is that the lines become blurred between work and life, especially when it comes to creative work or something that you're really passionate about. The ideas and the work is constantly kind of ringing in your head. I found that when I was working in a 9 to 5, it was easy to shut off my laptop for the day and not think about it for the rest of the evening. Or even when I was on vacation, just kind of like, put on my vacation responder in my email and not worry about work stuff. Versus now, because it's pretty much just me working, and if I'm not working, no one's working on the business, it's a lot harder to disconnect yourself from your work, even though it also is your passion or your hobby or something that you enjoy doing. All right, shifting over a little bit to the challenges with perception and family guilt. I think for me, growing up in an Asian household where no one is really self-employed, everyone is getting their degrees and getting a job, and education is kind of seen as the pinnacle of a successful career, deviating off and going on your own path takes a lot of courage. You have to put a lot of trust in yourself, knowing that you might not gain the support of your loved ones or people around you. I think that's the rice cooker. Let me just double check what happened. Okay, yeah, that was the rice cooker. The rice has finished cooking. It's currently 7 p.m., but it's okay. I will finish filming this video because we're on a roll here. But anyways, as I was saying, it can be really hard dealing with the family aspect of it because you will more often than not feel like the black sheep. It feels like you have to prove something. And it kind of sucks because you already had to prove so much to yourself to take the leap in the first place. But now it sometimes feels like you also have to prove it to your parents, your loved ones, just to say, hey, I'm doing okay, or this is a path that I truly believe in, or even friends. I think sometimes early on in the journey, we might not really get the support from our friends that we want, or people only really show support after you've become successful or showed some kind of traction. So on this self-employment path, you kind of have to be okay with having people who will doubt you, and you have to be resilient enough to keep moving forward, even in the times where their doubt might start to creep up and turn into your own doubt. And even after you've kind of passed over that hurdle of getting your parents or your loved ones to believe in you, there's still internal challenges that you might feel. I think one of the biggest ones that I remember feeling was last year. It was in October, and I remember I got the opportunity to be flown out for an opportunity. Thing is, this happened to coincide with Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and it also happened to creep up very, very close close to my sister's wedding. It was a few days before my sister's wedding, so it would have been cutting it really, really close to have gone to this conference. In the end, I decided to go because it was a really big opportunity, but I remember very vividly sitting in the hotel room and just feeling this very, very deep sense of guilt. I felt guilty for not being home for Thanksgiving, even though this wasn't the first time that I haven't been home for Thanksgiving. You know, when I was in school or working other jobs, I wasn't always able to come back for the holidays. And Thanksgiving isn't really a huge thing in my household, at least, but it still left me feeling very guilty. And it made me realize that there's a sense of guilt that you feel when you're self employed that you don't really feel as much when you are working under somebody else or with another boss. For example, if your boss tells you you have to go on this work trip or you have to work these late hours, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do those things and explain to your family, explain to your partner, explain to whoever that, hey, I have to lock in for work right now. And they just have to accept that. But when you're self employed, it hits a lot harder because it feels a lot more personal. Because you're the boss who's making the decision. There's no one to pin it on. There's no one to be like, oh yeah, my boss said I need to work late hours, so I can't. It's completely up to you. And that's what makes it feel a lot harder. I don't know if I explained that well enough, so I might just pop in the snippet that I took from when I was at the hotel room because I talked about it then. So yeah.
So I'm currently back at the hotel and it's about 12:25 a.m. and I just wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind all day. But I'm also whispering because the walls in this hotel are very, very thin. So this is unintentional ASMR right now. And I also know that there's someone in the other room and I'm pretty sure it's a family, so like I don't know. I'm just trying to be quiet. But so today was actually Canadian Thanksgiving. And, you know, for the past few Thanksgivings, I haven't really been home because I've been working somewhere that is not in my hometown. And it feels weird. And I can't help but feel selfish sometimes. And I think people don't really talk about this as much as maybe they should. But there's this overwhelming sense of guilt being here in Miami, having fun, talking to other creators, living my own life, knowing that I chose this instead of being home with my family. And I know it's not as black and white as just that, because it's interesting. You give yourselves more grace when you're working a corporate job. You know, in the years that I had missed Thanksgiving because of school or because of working a job, it was always just like, oh, I'm in the US right now. I'm somewhere else. I can't make it home. And there's this like mutual shared understanding. But when you're self employed and you're working for yourself, everything hits a little bit harder because you are now your own boss. It's not like, my boss expects me to work or I have this big work project that my team is relying on me to get done. It's just like I'm my own boss, so it is purely up to me if I decide to go to these things or if I decide to stay home. And there's a lot of guilt associated with that because suddenly everything feels much more personal. And it's a strange feeling that you have to get used to. And it's something that I still struggle to grapple with because it feels selfish to be chasing my dreams and doing these things. But I also don't want to feel this way because, again, if I was working a corporate job or something, then it's like it is what it is. But because I'm self-employed right now, it just feels like something is tugging more at my heartstrings. And I feel this sense of guilt more. And that's a tough pill to swallow that I feel like people don't talk about enough. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to acknowledge that because obviously I'm really grateful I'm here. I'm treating this like a work trip, but also trying to enjoy myself at the same time. But you just can't help but think about family and people back home. Yeah. But I'm going to try to take a shower, get some rest, because we got an early morning tomorrow. So
I'm not too sure if you guys or if other people have also felt this type of guilt when it comes to working for yourself, but it is just something that I noticed and I haven't really heard people talk about. So just wanted to share that part of my experience because yeah, there is no scapegoat. There's no one to blame or pin it on if you are late for something or you can't go to something or if you're simply prioritizing your work. The next set of challenges relate to productivity. So I think the thing about traditional employment is that it's a lot easier to measure productivity. There's goals that you're given or tasks that you're given or set working hours that you know you have to fit in. Something like going to the office and simply showing up feels like you're being productive or doing work. But when you're self-employed, you might feel guilty having downtime during the day or running an errand or even going to a networking event or some sort of event where you'll meet other people in your industry. It's these less tangible parts of your job or being self-employed that creep up on you and make you question if you're actually being productive or not. Because again, for most of your life, you've been told what productivity looks like. For example, productivity for me could be watching a movie or scrolling through Pinterest. These are things that don't typically sound productive, but they can be because it could be me trying to curate my taste or what type of vibe or gain inspiration for what I want to channel into my work in the future. The next big challenge with productivity that I wanted to discuss is actually rest, because rest can be productive too. I might make another video on this because I think it's something that's really important and I can talk on for hours. And I've made short form videos about this, but the thing about rest as a self-employed person is no one really tells you what rest is supposed to look like. It's not, oh, take X amount of vacation days or you have these holidays off. It's figuring out a pace that works for you and understanding when you need to slow down and when you can actually give yourself time to breathe a little bit. To be honest, this is something that I'm still trying to work through and define in terms of days off and things like that. Because if you think about it, again, you don't technically have to work from Monday to Friday. You can work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, for example, and then take those other days off. You could completely change up your schedule and do something different with it, but you just have to try things and see what works for you. All that to say that rest is something that you might struggle to define along your path of self-employment. But it is a very important one to be aware of because you don't want to get burned out either. And then finally, the last set of challenges that I wanted to talk about relate to finances. So I guess this really depends on what type of business you're running, but for me, and I'm sure many other freelancers or creatives, you'll notice that the money is not consistent. It's not the same as a salary. It's not like, okay, every 2 weeks you're guaranteed this paycheck. Instead, it's like, okay, some weeks you'll have a great month. You'll make a lot of money, but then there will be another month where you make no money. And it can just ebb and flow like that. And so it's really interesting because then how you budget, how you plan, how you use your money changes a lot. You have to be more prepared because in case there is a slowdown month or a month where, you're not able to make as much money, you have to be able to have savings or a bit of a safety net to kind of buffer for that. So just learning how to reshape my financial habits to account for this more has been really interesting so far. For example, the 50-30-20 rule that a lot of people use. Basically, something along the lines of every time you get your paycheck, 50% goes to needs, things that you need to expense like rent and all of that. 30% goes to wants, and 20% goes to savings. I've never followed this exactly. This is kind of more for an example. I've kind of always followed a different system for how I save and spend my money. But for simplicity's sake, that's one example of something that would look different to apply in a self-employed setting. So instead of doing that to every paycheck, maybe you do that every time you sign a new contract and get paid by a brand, a client, or whoever. I will say, even though finances can ebb and flow in a self-employed path, there is a lot of security, or I guess peace of mind, that surprisingly comes from all of it. Even though there can be inconsistencies, it does feel in a way a bit more stable because I remember before I quit my job, I was scared. I was scared to not have that consistent income. And one of my friends who had been doing the content creation path or just, self-employed for I think almost 3 years or over 3 years, she told me that she actually feels more stable in this path because the moment that you understand how to monetize your skills or your passions, you're no longer worried about being laid off or someone just cutting off your income source because because it's a matter of continuing to put in the work and trusting that you will be able to keep finding clients or deals or whatever it may be. It's kind of that scrappy mentality, I guess, that, is very uncertain, but once you do have that self-belief and once you kind of have seen that come to fruition, it does become a lot easier to trust that everything will be okay and make sense eventually, even if it doesn't right away. Now, I know I've talked a lot already and I've said a lot of challenges, and I guess to end off this video, I wanted to share some of the things that I'm trying in my self-employed life. I feel like I've said self-employed a lot, but I cannot think of other words right now to describe it, and that's like the most straightforward. But anyways, here are some things that I'm trying in my life right now. The first one is experimenting with different work rhythms. So as I was kind of alluding to earlier in the video, the beauty and the pain of being self-employed is not having to follow the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday schedule. So I think this year I want to experiment with different working schedules, whether that be being a morning person, probably not that, because I think I've already decided that I'm not a morning person, but maybe I'm like a nocturnal owl type person where I do most of my work in the evenings or at night, and then I use the day to just explore, play, do the things that I find inspiring or fun. So that's been kind of a work schedule that I've been trying to play around with, is what would my day look like or my week look like if I spent the typical daylight hours just doing whatever I want and then doing the work that I need to get done in the evenings. There's also other cycles that I've seen people try where, maybe they work 2 days on, 1 day off. So they will work for like Monday, Tuesday, take Wednesday off. They will work for Thursday, Friday, take Saturday off, and then they'll work Sunday, Monday, and it just kind of continues on the cycle of working 2 days on, 1 day off. I kind of like that, because I feel like weekends have always felt too short. So at least in this way, it kind of just feels like you're taking more of a consistent break. I don't know. I've also seen people take approaches where they will work for 6 weeks and then they will take the 7th week to just like rest and not do anything, just explore. So again, lots of different ways to experiment. And I think I want to try a bunch of these and just document what that looks like and see what actually feels good and works best for me. The next thing that I'm trying, and I've already talked about this in a previous video, is just documenting the frictions that I see in my day-to-day, just so that I can reflect on it at the end of the week and know what I want to change moving forward and what is actually working. Because again, kind of going on with the first point, if you're trying out all these different working rhythms, you won't actually know what's working if you don't stop and sit down and think about it and document it. So yeah, just documenting the frictions I think has been really important, as well as not setting hard goals, which again, I've talked about in a previous video. And finally, the last thing that I think is really important and I'm trying to focus on in my self-employed era is making enough room for exploration. So it's kind of the whole, how do you balance current success with future potential? I think that, as my friend puts it, there's always working on and in the business. And so just finding time to explore the things that you're passionate about, the things that you're curious about, can actually unlock a lot of new opportunities, and you might find something that you really love. And so just making intentional time for that is something that I don't want to lose. But yeah, those are some honest reflections on the challenges, the guilt, the things that you might face as a self-employed person, as well as a little bit of tidbits or advice that I had to share from my experiences so far. But yeah, if you're also self-employed and you related to any of these challenges or you found things that worked for you, feel free to comment them below, because I am curious to hear more about what that's been like for you. And if you are not currently self-employed, feel free to also ask questions, because I'm sure myself or other people watching would be happy to try and answer. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.